The students filed into the admissions office that afternoon to begin their sit-in for a living wage. They carried sleeping bags, food, and most importantly, their laptops. It was a time for them to rise up with a greater readiness and to stand with a greater determination. They were caught up in that which was right, but there was one problem. They didn't know what they were doing. I became fascinated by the students' use of technology. During the 19-day sit-in, they constantly messaged other activists across the country for guidance and leveraged the university email system to rally community support. Ultimately, the story my dissertation told was not about their victory, but about the democratic and civic lessons they learned while using the technology to achieve it. I hope to continue to explore technology more deeply, but I found myself at the beginning of a renewed national interest in student activism, and I had a mountain to climb. So I continued to chase campus protests and write about activism while asking students how technology affected their learning and other aspects of their student experience. I believe research questions should be tied to the methods we use to answer them. To be an interdisciplinary scholar, I felt I needed to expand my skill set, so I reached out to a faculty member in Korea, and he taught me how to use social network analysis. He was also a renowned authority in information communication technology use and invited me to collaborate. His work was primarily tied to technology-enabled networks. Together, we researched and wrote about digital media literacy, technology use, and ways to use multiple methodologies. This cross-discipline collaboration exposed me more deeply to the role of technology in communication and learning, and particularly those connections that students were making to enable their learning. We seldom question the need for technology in the university budget. We rationalize this as a need to keep up. For example, a decade ago, we were so sure students wanted to learn online, we invested considerable resources in infrastructure and very little on actual training. Also, we didn't balance this investment very well with research. In higher education, we also develop our own certainties. Confident students wanted to take classes in their pajamas. We purchased licenses, hardware, and classroom upgrades to enable online learning. We did this sometimes with an urgency that overlooked sensibility. Students wanted to learn on their own. They despised lectures. Faculty didn't use technology and refused to adapt. When the research started catching up, we saw a different picture. When we asked students how they actually use technology for academic purposes, students said it promoted connections to others and materials, increased their productivity, helped actually engage them with the university, and of course, supported their procrastination. They highly valued being able to connect with professors outside of class. As I collected and reviewed research and connected with experts in other disciplines, I considered ways technology influenced learning for good or ill. I found a very useful framework, whereas before I only thought about technology, and the framework added interaction, both user interaction and interaction with device. My colleagues and I applied this framework to a study in the US and Korea on technology use. And among students, we found that regardless of the technology they use in class, they very uniquely applied their own devices to their learning. I describe this as a hybrid shift wherein faculty might structure activities, but the student environment is principally driven by the exercises that they undertake. Recent results from an international study added some credibility to our finding and evidenced this inconsistency between student perceptions and faculty perceptions. For example, faculty believe students take notes with their devices less often and engage less often in non-class activities at a higher rate than they actually do. Notably, since 2013, fewer percentages of students have reported that they're not allowed to use smartphones in class. I can credit this partially to increasing use of interactive surveys, online textbooks, and class-related activities. Also, as an instructor, I kind of think that we've kind of given up on asking them to text in class. As I continued reading about and writing my own research, I found an opportunity in Montreal and took my young family to go. Telling the story of getting there and coming back is a whole nother pecha kucha. I was fortunate to be invited with some researchers to work this past semester. I began my research with the team having some notions about how students use technology, but I didn't know really how or why they used it. Concordia University provided a rich site for the international diversity of students and the prevalence of technology in the city. I collected survey data from a larger student population, conducted some interviews, and observed study spaces. Confirming research about the way they multitask, I found that they engaged in social media, messaged and searched the internet much more frequently during class even than I anticipated, but they did so much more for class-related activities. They also watched videos during class, and when I asked why, it was because they wanted to learn the material. during class. When talking with students, I also learned that technology gave them some self-sufficiency during their own study time, which they defined as being able to connect with others for help and support. I learned that students shared and contributed to an online folder system in which they stored all the files for class. In my interviews, watching videos came up most often with interviews with my engineering students. Mostly, they liked the ability to pause and follow along with lectures. If the videos had a lot of likes and was produced by a university source, it was deemed credible. One student said this is because he used the videos because he liked learning from two people. When I wrote my Fulbright proposal, I was sure I would glimpse the future of learning, and I found out quite a bit about how students actually prefer to learn in spending time with them, and I would urge anybody to spend time with students, and you can kind of learn this lesson on your own as well. Some good, some ill. As an outsider, they treated me as somebody they could really felt like they could relate to and talk with. Like my activism research had shown me before, though, what you look for is not always what you see. I didn't find the hyper-connected and distracted, technology-addicted learners I expected. I did find a few. I found students who valued and depended on traditional teaching strategies. They liked attending lectures. I've added some answers to questions about how users and learners use technology. I hope to explore how the skills translate to workforce. While conducting the research, I learned to communicate, share, and collaborate across geographic boundaries much more efficiently, and I've got some plans for some future studies in other locations. Ironically, most of the work that I do is with the technology I use. Thank you.